Mount Hope, West Virginia, rightly named and rightly placed at the head of the National Coal Heritage Trail. She enjoyed being the hub of wealth in West Virginia for over 60 years, all because Mount Hope was discovered to be rich in the world-famous smokeless coal. Nowhere east of the Colorado is there a better or superior grade of coal. The richness of smokeless coal not only brought powerful business to town, but it also drew the finest Ivy League professors to study here. Before they agreed to come from London and our New England states, the coal operators agreed to fulfill their personal requests on their list of creature comforts. This is the reason Mount Hope had a state-of-the-art, state-of-the-art for that era, YMCA before any other West Virginia city, including the state capital. Among the other coal mining towns, she was the first to have street lamps and sidewalks. In 1906, the New River Company opened in Mount Hope. They built their own warehouses, office building, machine shops, grocery store, and company store, to name a few. A tragic fire broke out in Mount Hope in 1910 and destroyed the town. Some say it started in the town bar. Mount Hope had to rebuild. The New River Company provided horses and wagons to take the valuables that citizens were throwing into the streets to a safer area. The New River Company contributed greatly to the cleanup and rebuilding effort. Several years later, the surrounding coal towns formed a coal miners' baseball team. When the winning team was determined by games won, the championship team got to play the Cincinnati Reds. Mount Hope shared that honor more than once. In the 1920s, the New River First Aid Team won an international title in Denver, Colorado. New River Company had several claims to fame when years later a young man we all know and love became a meat cutter for the New River Company while attending high school. Our very own Senator Robert C. Byrd. Another nearby family in Beckley owned Mount Hope's radio station. They were the family of Congressman Nick Joe Rahal, or Nicky J, as some of the older citizens remember referring to him when he was a little boy. Now let's meet some of the citizens of Mount Hope. We'll start with Mr. Tom Howard, a young man in his 80s. Tom owns the office building that once housed the operations of the New River Company. He owns a coal consulting firm inside the building and comes to work every day sporting one of his famous bow ties. Let's hear from Tom on how the Howards arrived in Mount Hope.
I was born in Mount Hope in 1922. I'm 85 years old, and my grandfather worked for the New River Company. He was an Oxford graduate. He was a Welshman. And my mother worked for the New River Company. My father worked for the New River Company. He was secretary to Mr. Scott. And I worked for them for a long time, until such a time that there was a change in management. I was chief engineer. I'd worked my way up through several positions, including coal loader. And the new president said the former chief engineer, who had been moved to assistant to the president, he said, "Tom, I don't need an assistant." That was Bill Haslam. You knew Bill. He said, "I don't need an assistant. Bill Haslam's coming back as chief engineer, and you'll be here as assistant." So I said, "Mr. Haslam, I'm too young to start going backwards. I can kind of remember that. We were expecting son Charles. Stupidest thing I ever did in my life." I said, "This is my last day with the New River Company." And I went home at noon, and Deputy didn't call me down here. They needed some information that afternoon, but that was my last day. And since then, we've been all over the world on consulting. I spent a lot of time in India. And
right?
I don't know, it's worked out very well. This is our building now. New River Company's Deadsville. They had its own telephone service, and this is where the company telephone operators operated from. At my home, when I was a boy, we had two telephones. One was on the regular line, one was a company.
Wow.
So, well, company stores. So you can imagine the number of orders for various canned goods and everything to go in the company stores. And down below here were two warehouses. One was the merchandise warehouse, which was operated by Mr. Tutwiler, and the other was the mining warehouse. Then there was the machine shop.
Mrs. Peggy Dorsey is a widow who has lived in Mount Hope most of her life and a retired school teacher. She jokingly blames her nephew, who is also the current town mayor, for being the reason she lost her sister as her bridesmaid on her wedding day. Mrs. Dorsey's sister was expecting to give birth several weeks away. The morning of the wedding, her sister goes into labor with her nephew and gave birth the same day.
Michael was born, and we call him Mike, was born the night Ralph and I were married, just about the same time, which prevented his mother and dad from coming to our wedding, which was in the Mount Hope Presbyterian Church in December 1947. Anything you needed, you could go to the company store. And of course, that meant that the miners, you know, the song, I owe my soul to the company store.
Yes.
And that was about it.
Mrs. Shirley Keatley Kellum is also a retired school teacher. She and her husband, Dr. Robert Kellum, live in the largest and well-groomed estate at Mount Hope. Shirley has lived here for many years and raised a family before being widowed. A few years back, she met and married a fine gentleman from Orlando, Florida, Dr. Robert Kellum. She has some interesting events on the construction of the mayor's office that has something to do with the history of her own estate.
It has 5 fireplaces and 5 bathrooms. And when he built the house, he built a garage beside of it. And the garage was built so that he could put his cars underneath and use the top of it as a doctor's office. Well, after it was finished, his wife decided that if he had patients there, they would be sitting on the porch when she had bridge club, and she didn't think much of that. So the garage had never been used until I bought the house, and I just furnished it as a little apartment. The doctor went uptown and bought another piece of land and put a big apartment building on it with, I think, maybe 4 apartments upstairs. Then he put his doctor's office on the main floor, and then there was a basement, and I don't remember what was in that. But now that building is the mayor's office. We had a flood in Mount Hope 4 or 5 years ago, and it completely destroyed our city hall. So they had to do something. So they purchased this building and put in City Hall, and it makes very nice for the people in Mount Hope.
Mr. Michael Martin is the mayor of Mount Hope. He's also an actor who has appeared in domestic and international films. He served on a school program as a Mark Twain impersonator and toured West Virginia high schools. Not since the days of the New River Company has Mount Hope seen such growth in leaps and bounds as under the leadership of this current mayor. Thanks for peeking into Mount Hope, West Virginia, on our way down the National Coal Heritage Trail.